Teen killer pretends to be mentally unstable. Meet Nicholas, a 19-year-old who's attempting to feign mental instability in a bid to lessen his legal punishment. Yet he's treading on thin ice, as a single misstep could condemn him to a lifetime of incarceration. It was on Valentine's Day in 2018 when Nicholas Cruz infiltrated his own high school, perpetuating one of the most atrocious incidents ever witnessed in American annals. Tragically, the lives of 17 students were extinguished. Within a mere hour of evading the crime scene, law enforcement apprehended Nicholas a couple miles distant from the site of his heinous act. Cruz's statements serve as the inception of an intricate tapestry of falsehoods he concocted in an attempt to feign insanity. As he's escorted for questioning, the situation takes a turn for the worse. The law enforcement officials guide him into the confines of the interrogation room and secure his restraints while his gaze remains fixated on the floor, giving the impression of a profound disconnection from his surroundings. Upon finding himself in solitude, Cruz promptly engages in the deliberate act of inspecting his surroundings for any presence of surveillance devices. As soon as he becomes aware of being under scrutiny, he instinctively performs a series of actions which include physical self-infliction by striking his own face and assuming a posture of despondency with his head lowered. While certain observers may perceive his behavior as a manifestation of being emotionally overwhelmed, a more plausible explanation suggests that he intentionally carried out these actions as an initial means to attract attention. Considering the notable shift in his disposition and conduct within the initial moments, it becomes evident that Cruz entertains the belief that by manifesting an ample array of atypical characteristics, he might successfully persuade a jury of his insanity, thereby securing a mitigated sentence. Acknowledging Cruz's tender age of 19 and his obvious turmoil, law enforcement authorities opt to dispatch a detective of the utmost amiable and affable nature with the hope that offering solace and reassurance would prove the most effective approach in eliciting his candidness. Nicholas adopts a distant demeanor in his interactions with the detective, employing soft-spoken words and unconventional head gestures to create an air of confusion. The detective, perceiving this as an opportunity, utilizes it to establish proximity to Cruz, subtly asserting his authority over the situation. In instances where a suspect displays indications of mental instability, two contrasting paths may unfold. They may succumb to a sudden eruption of emotions, engage in aggressive behavior toward the detective, or retreat into complete silence, refusing to cooperate. As the initial phase of a complex legal procedure, it is crucial for the detective to thwart the occurrence of either of these consequences. Instead, the detective's aim is to engage Cruz in conversation and extract maximum information before the suspect constructs a more intricate narrative. While Cruz chooses to remain silent, the detective persists in employing subtle tactics to gently prod Cruz. Observe how swiftly Cruz transitions from one demeanor to another as soon as the detective departs. Upon the closure of the door, there's a subtle relaxation in his muscles and a slight slump in his posture, indicating a greater level of comfort in the absence of the detective. However, a shift in his demeanor occurs when the presence of the second camera is brought to his attention. His left arm exhibits a momentary twitch, and his head initiates a movement suggestive of an intended action that is subsequently abandoned. These orchestrated gestures unmistakably reveal that his emotional displays are contrived rather than genuine expressions. Amidst these fabricated instances of self-harm, it is important to bear in mind that merely hours prior, Cruz mercilessly ended the lives of 17 individuals without suffering any bodily harm. Frequently, such horrifying incidents conclude with the perpetrator subsequently taking their own life, a conspicuous exhibition mirroring Cruz's desperate attempts to portray himself. Nevertheless, this abrupt and consistent occurrence of these actions serves only to reinforce the notion that Cruz's delusion lies solely in his conviction that this strategy will yield any success. The investigator later returns to inquire about basic information such as his place of accommodation and contact details. During the conversation, he also discovers that Cruz's mother passed away a mere 3 months prior to the incident. Despite maintaining mostly reticence, a significant shift occurs only a few minutes later. One would expect Cruz to experience a panic attack during his arrest when left alone for the first time in the interrogation room, or perhaps after the horrifying act of shooting 17 individuals. However, surprisingly, it is the inability to recall a phone number that triggers his distress. Suddenly, Cruz claims to be completely disoriented, lacking any knowledge of his whereabouts or current circumstances. Although it may appear improbable, we must entertain the notion that Cruz's current state may entail genuine unfamiliarity with his surroundings. Historical precedents have demonstrated instances wherein schizophrenia and psychosis played significant roles in motivating murderers. Psychosis engenders profound delusions, fostering unwavering faith in the impossible or blatantly false. Moreover, it gives rise to auditory and visual hallucinations, exemplified by Cruz's purportedly heard voices. It can also make it more difficult for you to process new information and cause you to miss things that are rather easy to recognize. Nevertheless, there are two key arguments that imply that it is unlikely that Cruz is personally experiencing this. These arguments show that it's unlikely he is personally experiencing it, as, to begin, research carried out very recently in 2022 indicates that, despite the fact that such acts are frequently blamed on psychosis or other mental problems, these factors only had a minor part in around 70% of the instances, and only a substantial one in 11%. In addition, there is no evidence that Cruz has ever suffered from schizophrenia, which is a serious mental illness that lasts for a long period of time. Neither has Cruz ever exhibited any of the symptoms that are linked with schizophrenia, nor has he ever had trouble differentiating his own ideas from reality. As a consequence of this, it is acceptable to disregard this as merely another instance of dishonesty. During the subsequent 30 minutes, the focus of the discussion shifts towards Cruz's personal history. Nevertheless, the crucial aspect lies in his continuous engagement with the detective. Initially, at the beginning of the interrogation, he adamantly avoided communication, displaying self-inflicted facial harm and experiencing rapid breathing. However, presently, he is responsive to inquiries and actively participates in the conversation. The detective endeavors to exploit this positive development by broaching the topic of auditory hallucinations, recollecting the earlier strategy to gather a multitude of details prior to the potential fabrication of a comprehensive narrative. During their conversation, Cruz recounts his purported encounters with the voices and explains that they were the ones who urged him to acquire the firearm initially. Now, it is crucial to thoroughly analyze the situation. Throughout the entire interrogation, there have been minimal abrupt changes in Cruz's physical demeanor. Overall, he appeared somewhat uneasy but remained relatively motionless with his arms outstretched. However, the moment the detective begins to question the authenticity of the voices, Cruz's entire body slumps and he clasps his hands together in front of him. The particular arrangement of his arms in this position is a well-known indicator of insecurity, suggesting that he unconsciously seeks self-protection. The gripping of his wrist additionally suggests a search for stability and grounding, as his entire narrative and justification are being dismantled right before his eyes. Whether it was the demons or Cruz himself, now that he has requested legal representation, the detective is obliged by law to refrain from further questioning until the lawyer is present. Throughout the entire course of this process, the question of did he do it was never open for discussion. He was captured on camera, identified by other students, and essentially confessed during the interrogation. Consequently, he was swiftly placed in solitary confinement in anticipation of his trial. However, the possibility of an insanity plea remained technically viable as he had not yet undergone a clinical examination. Thus, at a later stage of the trial, he encountered a psychologist. Cruz's demeanor during the explanation of his actions was notably uneasy, a stark contrast to his original demeanor and the expected reaction of a truly deranged individual. However, this is not the most revealing factor discovered by the psychologist. During an off-camera word-based memory test, Cruz exhibited memory impairment that surpassed that of a dementia patient. Furthermore, he recalled words that were never mentioned in the test, indicating selective memory retention. The psychologist's testimony concluded that Cruz possessed complete mental soundness but deliberately chose to manipulate and toy with everyone involved in the case, including the detective. Consequently, the insanity defense was dismissed and Nicholas Cruz faced the full legal consequences for his premeditated murder charges of 17 counts and attempted murder charges of 17 counts. He received 34 consecutive life sentences, amounting to an astonishing total of over 1,000 years in prison. Only a single juror dissented from imposing the death penalty.